The Silk Road changed the world. You've probably heard that. The Silk Road wasn't a road at all. It was an entire network of trade routes stretching from Eastern Asia through the Middle East and into Europe. It began during the Han Dynasty around 130 BCE and lasted for more than 1,500 years. Along its many paths, the Silk Road connected countless kingdoms, empires, and cultures. And while it had a huge impact on the flow of goods and wealth, its influence went far beyond that. The Silk Road also led to the spread of religions, philosophies, and technologies. It changed how people viewed the world and helped lay the groundwork for globalization itself. But what made the Silk Road so important? What was it about this ancient network of trade routes that caused such massive cultural and technological change? Let's find out. When you hear Silk Road, you might picture silk being traded. And yes, silk was one of the most famous goods that traveled along the route. Other famous products included spices, jade, paper, porcelain, and glass. But those items only tell part of the story because the Silk Road carried much more than just products. In fact, the full story of the Silk Road can only be told by exploring the many things it carried besides goods. For example, Buddhism started out in India and eventually made its way to China and other parts of Asia thanks to the Silk Road. At the same time, Islam spread from the Middle East into Central Asia along the trade route, and Christianity moved from the Middle East into China. Merchants traveling along the Silk Road often followed these newly adopted religions on their journeys. So religious ideas were shared not only between different Asian countries, but also between Asia and Europe. The Silk Road was also a way for people to share their philosophies and knowledge. For instance, Greek and Roman ideas about mathematics, astronomy, and medicine found their way to China. At the same time, Chinese inventions like gunpowder, paper, and printing spread westward. People who traveled along the Silk Road would adopt these new ideas and then share them with others when they returned home. This process of exchanging ideas helped to create a more interconnected world and inspired innovation in many different fields. Traveling along the Silk Road was no easy task, though. Caravans of camels and merchants braved harsh deserts, high mountains, and dangerous bandits on their way to their destination. The journey was long and arduous, but the potential rewards were great. And because of the dangers involved in traveling along the Silk Road, merchants banded together to protect themselves. They formed groups called caravans, which consisted of a large number of merchants traveling together for safety. These caravans could number in the thousands and often had their own leaders and even military escorts. Traveling in a caravan was the best way to ensure that your goods arrived safely at their destination. But it still took a lot of courage and planning to brave the unknown dangers of the Silk Road. Despite the difficulties involved in traveling along the Silk Road, the rewards were great. For centuries, the trade route was incredibly profitable, bringing in huge amounts of wealth to the empires and kingdoms that controlled it. Cities like Samarkand, Kashgar, and Baghdad became wealthy cultural crossroads where merchants from all over the world came to buy and sell their goods. This led to the growth of cities along the Silk Road and the creation of new industries and jobs. For example, the demand for luxury goods in China led to the creation of entire villages that specialized in making silk, porcelain, and other high-end products. Similarly, the need to transport goods along the Silk Road led to the development of new technologies and transportation methods. For example, the invention of the compass and the astrolabe helped merchants navigate the vast distances involved in trading along the Silk Road, and the use of camels as a mode of transportation allowed traders to carry more goods over long distances. But the Silk Road wasn't just about the exchange of goods and wealth. It was also a way for people to share their ideas and knowledge. For example, Chinese paper-making techniques spread to the Middle East and Europe via the Silk Road, and Indian numerals and the concept of zero were introduced to China along the same route. These exchanges had a profound impact on the development of human civilization. For example, the introduction of paper to the Middle East and Europe led to the creation of new technologies and industries. And the adoption of Indian numerals made it easier for people to keep track of vast amounts of data, which helped to spur scientific and technological advances. One of the most significant contributions of the Silk Road to world history was the spread of printing. The art of printing originated in China and spread to Korea and Japan via the Silk Road. From there, it eventually made its way to Europe, where it helped spark the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. By allowing people to reproduce written works more easily, printing helped to increase literacy rates and the spread of knowledge throughout the world. It truly revolutionized the way information was shared and helped to lay the foundation for modern-day communication. But it wasn't all good news that traveled along the Silk Road. One of the darkest chapters in the history of the Silk Road is its role in the spread of the Black Plague. The disease, believed to have originated in China and spread to other parts of Asia and Europe via the trade routes. It's estimated that the plague killed millions of people, leading to massive social and economic upheaval in both Asia and Europe. While it's impossible to say exactly how the plague spread, historians believe that it was carried along the Silk Road by rats and fleas that infested merchant ships and caravans. As the disease spread, it caused widespread panic and fear, leading to the persecution of various groups, including Jews and Muslims, who were often blamed for the outbreak. But despite its dark side, the Silk Road continued to thrive for centuries. The trade routes remained busy as merchants from all over the world continued to seek out the riches of the East. Even as the Silk Road began to decline in the late Middle Ages, it left a lasting legacy on the world. The ideas, technologies, and products that had flowed through the trade routes had a profound impact on the development of human civilization. The Silk Road helped to shape the course of history, and its influence can still be felt today. So why did the Silk Road eventually fall? Well, the decline of the Silk Road began in the 15th century when sea routes became more established. As European explorers began to discover new sea routes to Asia, the need for overland trade routes such as the Silk Road began to diminish. Additionally, the rise of new empires and political conflicts along the trade routes also disrupted the flow of goods and ideas. As the Silk Road began to decline, it marked the end of an era in world history. The trade routes that had once connected the East and the West were no longer as important as they had been. However, the legacy of the Silk Road lived on as the ideas and innovations that had flowed through the trade routes continued to shape the world. Overall, the Silk Road had a profound impact on the world. It helped to spread ideas, technologies, and products from Asia to Europe and vice versa. The exchange of goods and services along the trade routes generated immense wealth for the empires and kingdoms involved. But perhaps the most significant contribution of the Silk Road was the spread of printing. This innovation revolutionized the way information was shared and helped to lay the foundation for modern communication. Although the Silk Road eventually fell, its legacy lived on. The trade routes may have closed, but the connections forged along the Silk Road continued to shape the world for centuries to come. From the bustling bazaars of Baghdad to the towering mountains of Central Asia, the Silk Road was a vibrant tapestry of cultures, ideas, and goods. It was a place where merchants from all over the world came together to trade and exchange ideas. But perhaps the most important thing to remember about the Silk Road is that it wasn't just a physical route. It was a connection between people, cultures, and ideas. It was a pathway to understanding and cooperation between the East and the West. Even today, the legacy of the Silk Road lives on in the way we do business and interact with each other. The spirit of adventure and exploration that drove the merchants along the Silk Road is still alive in us today. So next time you look at a map, remember that the world is much smaller than we think. And with a little curiosity and courage, we can explore it all. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.